All right, welcome everyone. We are diving deep today into the world of Bob Camblin.
Bob Camblin.
He's this artist who is so well known, but also kind of mysterious.
Yeah. Enigmatic, I think, is the word that gets thrown around a lot.
Enigmatic, exactly.
Yeah.
And we've got a whole bunch of sources to try to figure him out, don't we? We've got excerpts from his own writings, which is amazing, right?
Direct access to his thoughts,
Yeah, a full biography.
laying out his life, his career.
So we've got the context there,
Mm-hmm.
and people talking about his art. We've got a few books.
Zen and the Art of Enlightenment, volumes 1 and 2. That sounds promising, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And Bob Camblin in Complete Works, Volume 1.
So we're getting the big picture, but also the details.
And then there's this YouTube discussion about one specific painting.
Private property, which is already making me think.
Me too. And then some historical context, looking back on his career.
So we're not just looking at his art, we're looking at how it fits into the bigger picture.
Exactly. And the goal here is to really understand his creative vision, how he saw the world, and what that tells us about art, and maybe even about ourselves, and how we try to find meaning. It's a big task, but I think we're up for it, aren't we?
I'm ready if you are. Where should we start?
Well, even before we really dig in, a few things jumped out at me from these sources right away. And I think they might intrigue you too. Like the fact that he basically walked away from academia, to live this nomadic life, dedicated solely to his art. That's a pretty huge decision.
It is. It makes you wonder about his priorities, his sense of commitment, what drove him to make that choice.
And then he signed some of his work as anonymous.
Fascinating. The ego just disappears.
Right. And on top of all of that, one book review described his art as puzzles that want to be solved.
Puzzles, I like that.
Me too. And that's how I'm approaching this whole deep dive. Like we're solving a puzzle with all these different pieces. His life, his words, his art.
It's not going to be easy, but that's part of the fun, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with Camblin's own words. Maybe we can find some clues there. He's got all these amazing quotes, like this one. He says we should embrace common sense and the perfectly average in order to enjoy miracles of science and magic. And he even talks about a bright gray between extremes. I mean, what does that even mean?
It's about balance, I think, not getting stuck in one way of seeing things, finding the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Yeah, that makes sense. He's not interested in black and white.
More like shades of gray, and maybe those shades can be pretty bright.
Right, and then he's got this other quote that's so bold. He says the sixth sense is to be, without a doubt, senza dubio. He even throws in the Italian.
Intuition, it's not just about what we can see and hear and touch. It's about trusting something deeper.
But then, this other quote seems kind of contradictory. He says, bright day and I soar, how cruel that my soul is attached to this earth, and yet. So there's the tension, the yearning for something beyond, but being stuck here.
Yeah, that's it. Like, he wants to fly, but something's holding him back. It's a very human dilemma, isn't it?
Totally. Okay, and then there's this piece of advice he offers. It feels so personal. Find something in nature that completes you, and then surrender.
Surrender. That's a loaded word.
What do you think he means by that?
Letting go of control, maybe? Trusting in something larger than yourself, finding inspiration in the natural world?
Yeah, that's how I see it too. And then there's this little cluster of quotes. They're almost like mini mantras, like the light is all you need.
Light. Essential for a painter, of course.
Right, but it's also metaphorical, don't you think?
Illumination. Understanding.
And then the end is to evolve by doing the best you can.
Striving for something better. Constant growth.
And the means to get there. Amplify what you're doing and believe. So it's not enough to just try. You have to believe in it.
Conviction. That's powerful stuff.
It is. And he's not just talking about art here. He's talking about life.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got these other things that keep popping up, like balance, patience, freedom.
All very Zen concepts.
Totally. And he says reality can be maintained in silence.
Silence. That's where the truth resides.
Right. But then there's this weird quote about love. He says, true love moves to indifference to protect itself.
That's an interesting take on love, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of dark. Like, love is so powerful, so vulnerable, that it needs to build walls around itself.
To avoid getting hurt. Maybe that's part of the human condition, too.
Okay. And then he basically redefines art. He says, not art for art's sake, but art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake.
So it's grounded in the everyday, not just some lofty ideal.
Exactly. Art is essential. It's personal. It's about getting by in the world. And then there's this instruction that feels so zen. Step off the train of thought.
Stop thinking so much.
Right. To find the power that is no power.
Effortless
To
action.
do the work that is not work.
It's about being present, not striving.
Yeah. And then he throws in, to laugh the true laugh, bending is not bowing.
Authenticity, integrity.
So many layers.
And we're just getting started.
Right. Okay, there's this part where he talks about regret, missing the clouds because he was so focused on something else. And then his mind reaches a still pond like lightning.
So there's this sudden clarity after being distracted.
Yeah, and he talks about balancing and being for and against at the same time.
Holding opposites in tension.
And then this piece of advice that seems totally contradictory. When you think, don't act. When you act, don't think.
It's about being fully present in whatever you're doing, thinking or acting.
Right, don't overthink it. Just do it. Or
Yeah.
don't do it, just think it.
Focus on the task at hand.
It's almost like a koan, one of those Zen riddles.
Right, it's got that flavor.
And then there's this little anecdote about someone talking about changing the world and then just paying for their coffee and leaving.
So much for grand pronouncements.
Right. It's back to reality. Everyday life.
The mundane details.
But then he gives us these gorgeous descriptions of nature. Like he's so tuned in to the light, the colors. He talks about how sun-heated air moves across the electrons of my skin and the light reflecting off the leaves.
He's a visual artist through and through. Even his words paint pictures.
Totally. And then there's this weird little story about Act 1, 2, 3 on a tower with clouds, wind, and lightning. And then he leaves before the end.
Maybe he's saying that the journey is more important than the destination? Or that sometimes it's better to leave things unfinished?
Maybe. I love how his mind works. It's so unpredictable.
And thought-provoking.
And there's this line that's just pure Camblin. Much better than arguing is to look at my watercolor palette.
He'd rather create than fight.
Definitely. Okay, now he's talking about white and black. He says, white is light, black is absence of light, but people are seen. The last part is interesting.
Even in the absence of light, people stand out. We notice them.
Yeah. It's like we can't help but see each other, even in the darkness. And then he talks directly to Mother Nature, asking for her opinion on his last picture.
It's almost like he's seeking approval from a higher power.
Yeah. Like, does nature approve of what I'm doing?
A very humble question.
And then we get this little window into his mind. He says, 5 thoughts crashed at South Boulevard in Mandel. And then he lists these seemingly random ideas.
Like a car wreck in his brain.
Totally. But then he adds, no one was injured.
It's so funny.
He doesn't take himself too seriously.
And then he gives us really practical advice about how to end arguments. With a pessimist, you just say, you're absolutely right. And with an optimist, you say, it's a banana.
2 very different approaches.
Right. But they both kind of work in a weird way.
Deflecting and disarming.
Okay, now he's asking these deep questions about perception. He asks, as people move away from us, do they diminish in our eyes or mind or relativity?
Distance. How does it affect our relationships, our memories? And then he observes something about himself. He says, my attempts to stop arguing created an argument.
Sometimes the best intentions backfire.
And he makes this really insightful distinction. If you argue or if you agree, you may learn, but you do not communicate.
Arguing and agreeing are both intellectual exercises, but real communication goes deeper.
Right. It's about understanding each other, not just winning the argument.
Connection versus conquest.
Okay, now he's using a metaphor. He says, the gate stays open, the fence is broken, he keeps searching, but does not know the size of his quarry. Yet he has faith. He looks in all directions, if he could only see all around all at once.
The search for meaning. Maybe even the artistic process itself.
Yeah, it's like he knows there's something out there,
Yeah.
but he doesn't know what it is or how to find it.
The unknown is both terrifying and alluring.
Totally. And he contrasts revolution and evolution, saying revolution just leads to surface changes, but evolution brings real change and understanding.
It's about inner transformation, not just external upheaval.
And he throws in this classic proverb. You never miss the water until the wells run dry.
Appreciate what you have before it's gone.
A timeless reminder. And then, scattered throughout these writings, are these little moments of poetry. These observations of nature that feel almost like haiku.
He's capturing those fleeting moments of beauty, the way light plays on the water, a bird taking flight.
He's definitely got that haiku sensibility. the simplicity, the directness. And he says that artists are the only true free agents in society.
Because they're not beholden to any particular ideology.
Right. They can see things from multiple perspectives.
And challenge the status quo.
And he even talks about participatory type of art.
That's pretty forward thinking.
Yeah, like he's envisioning art that's not just something you look at, but something you experience,
Yeah.
you engage with, you become a part of.
It breaks down the barriers between the artist and the audience.
Okay, now he throws out this equation. Religion, belief. What do you make of that?
He's reducing religion to its core. Faith. It's about what you believe, not necessarily about dogma or rituals.
And maybe he's saying that art is different. It's not about blind faith. It's about questioning, exploring, interpreting.
And maybe even changing your beliefs along the way.
Right. He also talks about faith, discipline, and communication, saying they can be both helpful and harmful.
They're tools. It's how you use them that matters.
And then this. Art is and it isn't, and now everyone knows love art.
That's a head scratcher.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
he's saying art is undefinable. It's constantly changing. And maybe that love art thing is a bit of a jab at how those concepts are often oversimplified.
Like a bumper sticker slogan.
Exactly. And he says that if you've truly experienced love or art, you don't need to explain it.
It's a direct, visceral understanding.
Okay, now he throws in this a resist and submit held in perfect balance idea,
Yeah.
and then talks about figure 4 with a series of movements. It's kind of cryptic.
It's like a metaphor for life. The constant push and pull.
And he warns against the demon of being right.
The ego loves to be right, but it can blind us.
And he gives this advice. Flow. And think of what you are doing, not what you plan to do. Step off the train of thought. It's all about being present, isn't it?
Letting go of the need to control everything.
Trusting the process. And then a bit of cynicism. He says historians love artistic madness when it's safely in the past.
It's easy to romanticize rebellion after the fact.
Right, once it's no longer a threat.
Okay.
And then he talks about training ourselves to open our perception,
To see more, to understand more.
not to get stuck in our limited ways of seeing the world. And he distinguishes between believing and knowing, saying mystics have been somewhere that logic can't reach.
It's about direct experience, not just intellectual understanding.
And then he throws out this line. History is believable when it's creative,
It's not just about facts and dates, it's about interpretation, imagination.
bringing the past to life. And he defines cynicism as a type of creativity gone destructive and ego-oriented.
So cynicism is not the absence of creativity, it's creativity twisted and turned inward.
And he thinks we lose our magic when we try to understand everything rationally,
There's a certain wonder that gets lost.
when we dissect everything. And he uses this metaphor of pushing up, like a tree growing slowly, emphasizing the accumulation of small things without blame.
Steady, consistent effort, patience, no self-criticism.
And then this. Draw, teach, search, reveal, always framed in paradox.
That's his life's work in a nutshell.
And he calls for a return to an unknown and naive approach to art, criticizing the influence of history, critics, and affluent culture.
Back to basics, pure expression.
And he dismisses the importance of categorization in art, saying, identification is the aesthetic. Pass quickly onto the next slide, please.
Don't get bogged down in labels, just experience the art.
And then he compares a critic to a legless man who teaches running. Ouch.
Not very flattering, but it makes a point.
Right. Critics can talk about art, but they can't create it.
Theory versus practice.
And he talks about the innate need to make marks, saying it predates even weapons.
Art as a primal urge, a way of communicating before language.
Yeah. And he's not a big fan of forced intention in art.
It's about the process, the discovery, not just the end result.
And he says artists are like leaving Easter eggs for historians to find.
Little clues and hidden meanings.
And he warns that facility is like the Midas touch
Technical skill can be a trap.
if it becomes the only goal. And he wonders if all the empty art out there is what's driving critics and historians to fill it with meaning.
Interesting thought. Maybe they're trying to compensate for something that's not there.
And he makes this provocative statement. The visual arts have finally become non-visual.
It's about the concept, the idea, not just the image.
And he brings in Zen again. Zazen, the aimless mind, focuses itself.
Quieting the mind to allow for inspiration.
And he encourages us to play the game as if your life depended on it, but without fear or doubt.
Fully committed, but also playful.
He categorizes drawings into action experiment, slow analytic, and conceptual.
Different approaches for different purposes.
And he emphasizes that drawing and concept are fundamentally nonverbal.
Visual art speaks its own language.
And he talks about how a simple haiku can evoke such a huge reaction,
The power of suggestion.
leaving space for the reader to fill in the blanks. And he believes we all have a mystic switch that we can learn to access.
A way of knowing that goes beyond logic.
And he talks about the difference between looking and seeing, saying we need to try to fail in order to truly succeed.
Failure is part of the process.
Embrace it. And he says that process and awareness cannot be failure.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
And he sees writing as this very linear, logical form of communication, unlike drawing, which allows for recreation.
Drawing is more fluid, more intuitive.
And he talks about how activities like drawing, reading, and music engage the rational mind, while the ZAZN mind is where the magic happens.
The unconscious mind is a powerful, creative force.
And then he says something really radical.
Yeah.
We need to resist learning in order to truly think.
Unlearn what you've been taught. Question everything.
And he quotes someone saying, I didn't learn anything new, but I know a lot more now.
Deepening your understanding of what you already know.
And then a little bit of Zen wisdom. We have nothing to fear but ourselves.
We are our own worst enemies.
And he sees mirrors as a reflection of the fact that we are all mirrors to each other.
Interconnectedness, we reflect each other.
And he talks about the jump, that moment of intuitive knowing.
When you just know something without being able to explain it.
And he contrasts negative magic, which is about power, with positive magic, which is about seeing.
Art can be used for both good and bad.
And he says that real seeing is deceptive, and art is just partial retention.
We can never fully capture reality.
It's always filtered through our own perception. And then this, fool the eye, fool the mind.
Playful trickery, challenging our assumptions.
And he talks about the artist's struggle to balance technique, novelty, and societal expectations.
It's a tough balancing act.
And he's not happy about the popularization of yin and yang and mandala.
When profound symbols lose their meaning.
And he quotes the symbolists. Explaining something kills it.
Some things are better left unsaid.
And then a simple expression of joy. How nice to finally mix fun and art.
Art should be enjoyable.
And he acknowledges the influence of time and all the different sources that feed into his art.
The cumulative effect of experience.
And he describes the standard sign against the sunset, saying that only we know what it means.
Shared meaning within a specific context.
And he believes that knowledge doesn't necessarily educate.
Experience is the best teacher.
And he even ponders the future of idioms, how their meanings might change over time.
Language is constantly evolving.
Okay, now for a visual. White crystals, white salt, white wing, white bones.
Images of death and decay.
And then this advice. There are no mistakes. You are doing the best you can, and mistakes are nature's way of telling you to trust your instincts or the next mistake could be really bad.
Trust your gut.
Learn from your mistakes. And he plays the saying, pride goeth before a fall.
Turning it on its head. Exploring different interpretations.
And he uses this amazing metaphor of two bits of a hologram arguing instead of cooperating.
Limited perspectives, the need for collaboration.
Then first chaos, then order, chaos, order, or vice versa.
The cyclical nature of things.
And the hologram collective clarity through interconnectedness.
We're all part of something bigger.
And then a sense of approaching the edge of real time.
The present moment is all we have.
And he explores different ways of viewing the universe, suggesting that solipsists just misunderstand.
Solipsism is a limited perspective.
And he talks about living in the past, present, and future with the purpose to dream of how it works.
We're here to explore the mysteries of time.
And then time travel at the speed of enlightenment.
Profound insights can transcend time.
And he contrasts the hawk and the snake as different approaches to existence.
Active versus passive.
And then there's the way back, a journey through silence, melting rocks, space, and time.
A return to the source. A new beginning.
And he tells a story about Louis Sullivan and honor.
Integrity matters.
And he uses this metaphor. Some crutches are wooden, some are gold.
Not all support is created equal.
And then he notes the conflict between futility and provocation and says, dolce far niente.
The sweet joy of doing nothing.
And then phoenix frozen in a salty shell.
Unable to renew or regenerate.
Stuck. And then empty rib cage full of sand.
The emptiness of material existence.
But the true meaning is in living, just being. And then this cosmic vision, the universe folding back on itself, waiting for a magnificent pulse.
Breathtaking.
And finally, all these quotes from other thinkers, so many different voices. Shinichi Suzuki, Alan Watts, William James, Sartre, A Zen Proverb, Bergson, Teilhard de Chardin, Lamarck, Koestler, Jung, John Fowles, Dostoevsky, Salinger, Updike, Barth, Durrell.
It's like a symphony of ideas.
Yeah, he was clearly influenced by so many different people.
Absorbing and synthesizing.
Okay, so that's a lot of words. What about the art itself? How do we connect all of this to what he actually created?
Well, I mean, a lot of these ideas come through pretty clearly in his work, don't they? Like, take private property, for example.
A painting.
Yeah, private property. We've got a description of it. Bare trees, dry landscape. It's got this rope marking off a boundary, and the colors are kind of subdued.
It sounds bleak.
It does, doesn't it? There's this sense of fragility and maybe the pointlessness of trying to own something when nature is just so powerful.
But then, the YouTube video we mentioned, they say there are hidden images in the painting.
Oh yeah, that video. It completely changes how you see it.
Like what kind of hidden images?
They talk about figures, faces almost like ghosts, and then this figure with a mask.
Whoa.
It goes from this simple landscape to something much more complex and kind of creepy.
And the video says this is all about Zen,
Mm-hmm.
seeing beyond the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And the masked figure. That's the ego, guarding our possessions.
Our stuff, our ideas, our sense of self.
And the video also connects it to the I Ching,
Mm.
specifically hexagram 39, obstruction.
So it's a difficult path, a time for reflection.
And they ask this question, what do we really own? Is it stuff? Or is it experiences, moments, relationships?
That hits hard, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you think about what's really important. And the video says the painting is also about boundaries between us and other people, between our past and present,
It's not just about owning land, it's about all the boundaries we create.
in our minds. And the video even talks about how our brains are wired to see patterns, even when they're not there.
But that's why we see those hidden images. We're imposing order on chaos.
So Camblin is playing with that.
Definitely. He's making us question what we see and what we think we know.
Okay, and then we have the Zen and the Art of Enlightenment books, 2 whole volumes. The review we have describes them as this conversation between art and philosophy. They're full of sketches and these visual traps and tricks and talismans with all these symbolic meanings.
Sounds dense.
It does, but also fascinating. And the review says Camblin takes ordinary objects and turns them into symbols.
Like what?
They mention a figure 4 trap, a tattooed arm, a frog.
Everyday things, but with hidden meanings.
And the sketches are like blueprints for ideas. It's a direct link between the visual and the philosophical.
So we're seeing his thought process laid bare.
And the books are all about this question. What's real and what's illusion?
That's a big one.
And there's this recurring theme of traps. Traps of fear. Traps of time. Traps we create for ourselves.
All of the things that hold us back.
And the review talks about enduring stillness in the books. But they don't say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
It's ambiguous.
Is he being stuck? Or is it finding peace?
It's up to the reader to decide.
And they say the books don't offer answers. They offer questions. Riddles. Like Zen koans.
It's about prompting thought, not providing easy answers.
Making us work for it. And the foreword to the books talks about how art history is really a reflection of how human perception has changed over time. They even connect realism and abstract expressionism.
Interesting. 2 very different movements.
But they say it's all connected to Zen and the I Ching, this idea of direct experience and cyclical change.
So Camblin is part of a larger historical and philosophical conversation.
And they talk about art as a portal to heightened awareness. They even connect some artworks to specific I Ching hexagrams.
Art as a tool for self-discovery.
And the review emphasizes the cyclical nature of things and the acceptance of inner change,
Embracing impermanence.
which is very Zen. And then they say these books are like a silent dialogue, a catalyst for self-discovery. It's not about being told what to think. It's about figuring it out for yourself.
That's powerful.
And finally, the review says Camblin's art helps us see beauty in absurdity and to embrace the impermanence of everything. It's like a meditation tool.
Mindfulness through art.
It's about slowing down, paying attention, questioning everything.
And maybe even finding a little bit of enlightenment along the way.
Okay, so we've talked about his words, his ideas, and one specific painting. But Camblin created so much art over such a long period of time. So can we talk about his style, how it evolved?
Yeah, I mean, his work is all over the place, isn't it? In a good way. He started with abstract impressionism, and then he was a pioneer of this technique called mouches volantes. It
Spacious.
involves creating these optical illusions. You see things that aren't really there.
Whoa.
And he worked in all sorts of mediums: oils, acrylics, watercolors, drawings, prints. He even painted on paper.
And there's this period in the 1970s where he's really exploring metamorphosis, using all these symbols, puppets, scarecrows, skulls.
Transformation, death, and rebirth.
And his later works are full of hidden meanings and ambiguities that multiply the more you look at them, like private
Oh,
property.
there's always more to discover.
And he said he wanted to remake Goya in 20th century terms.
Ambitious.
Definitely. And his early work had this social protest element to it. But then he moved into this combination of social realism and non-objectivity.
So he's blending the political with the abstract.
And he built these corrections into his drawings.
Deliberate imperfections.
And he always aimed for monumental subject matter.
Big ideas. Universal themes.
And in the 1960s, he was trying to combine poetic suggestions with emotional overtones in his work.
Art that speaks to the heart and the mind.
And then in the 1970s, it's all about the mystical, evoking subjective states of mind. And the hidden meanings often require knowledge of all sorts of different thinkers to decipher.
It's like a treasure hunt.
And he uses text in his drawings.
Yeah.
But not just for information. It's more like clues to help us unlock the meaning,
He's inviting us to participate.
to think for ourselves.
Mm.
So yeah, his style is all over the map, but there's a thread that runs through it all,
A search for truth. For meaning.
and a desire to challenge our perceptions.
Make us see the world in a new way.
And we have these amazing quotes from people who knew him. Like Pete Gershon says he was a perennial student, constantly searching for answers. And George O. Jackson Jr. calls him an artist's artist.
High praise.
And Earl Staley, who was his friend and collaborator, says Camblin was always asking questions. And Penny Serling says he had a unique way of seeing things. And Carolyn Farb talks about his autobiographical art.
So his life and his art were intertwined.
And the biography we have goes into all of that. It talks about how his art evolved alongside all these larger movements in the art world.
It's fascinating to see how he fit in and how he broke away.
And Earl Staley's personal account is so insightful. He talks about how they shared a studio and how Camblin eventually withdrew from the Houston art scene to this little wizard's den studio.
Solitary space for creation.
And he even talks about Camblin's Mr. Peanut persona.
For their whimsy.
And then Camblin moved away. Eventually passed away. But his impact on his friends and the art world, it's still felt today.
He left a legacy. Host speaker.